All right, so we're on to the second talk. This is the longer talk I'm going to give tonight on how we run rubygems.org. And this is the first time I'm giving this one. So we will get into, this is a slide on me. So again, Marty Haught. I've been around the community for quite some time. I got started with Ruby in 2005. I started Paris.rb in 2006 and still run it, although I have help. It's very challenging to run a Meetup all by yourself. We call them user groups back in 2006. We call them Meetups, I guess now. But even though we don't use Meetup, we use Luma at this point. I've been a conference organizer for a long time as well. I started helping organize conferences in 2007. And most people know me because I helped run RubyConf and RailsConf for many years. So I joined Ruby Central as a board member in 2012 and helped run that with Evan Phoenix and Sarah May. I've been an engineering director at Fastly and HashiCorp, and I also ran my own software consultancy. But about a year ago, I took on the role of director of open source. This is a new position we created, and I'll talk a little bit about why we created that. And here's the history lesson. So where did it all start? Well, here is a condensed timeline of both Ruby Central and Ruby Gems. So Ruby Central was formed in 2001. It's a nonprofit in the United States. Technically, it's a 501c3 charitable organization. And they were able to get that because they were focused on education. It's actually very challenging to get a charitable organization designation in the United States, especially for tech-related nonprofits. 2003 is when Ruby Gems was developed. It was developed at the third RubyConf. Fun fact, it was actually pitched at the first RubyConf in 2001. And on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that story. But you can see kind of like when rubygems.org was created. In 2004, it was actually launched under RubyForge. For those that might remember RubyForge, that was a Ruby version of SourceForge. And it served the actual gem index and all that. And also kind of a fun tie-in to the performance talk was that the initial Ruby Gems implementation was only designed to go to about 100 gems, because I thought that'll be enough. So Chad Fowler, who we'll get to talk about Chad a little bit, multiple times they built just enough to get going to that next level, and then they realized it wasn't going to scale, and they rewrote the parts that were not working well. So that is a classic pattern that is great for tackling scale. So for many years, from around 2009 is when things started to get complicated. Before 2009, we actually did not have bundler, so it was quite interesting to deal with dependencies back then. So bundler was created to address that. And Engine Yard at the time actually funded all that development for many years, up until 2015. Engine Yard actually paid developers to work on Ruby Gems and bundler and MERB, if you remember MERB back then. So in any event, Ruby Together was formed after that because Engine Yard stopped paying for that work, and so that was why Ruby Together was formed. And then Ruby Together eventually merged with Ruby Central. So Ruby Central at the time was doing the hosting for Ruby Gems, but Ruby Together was doing the operations and maintenance. And so in 2024 is when we launched the open source program, and that's when my role was created, because things were getting complicated enough that we needed to make a formal role for this work, and we also needed to grow the program. So if you want to know more, there's a podcast. Actually, it's a podcast that I just started with David Hill. The first episode came out in July, just a couple months ago. And the first episode with Chad Fowler. And Chad talks about the start of Ruby Central and Ruby Gems. There's some interesting stories also about how a person pitched the idea in 2001, but then disappeared. And then in 2003, they're like, hey, we should build this. And he was right. We're going to take his idea and just run with it. So anyway, lots of interesting stories in that podcast. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Open source program. So this QR code just goes to the open source program page on Ruby Central. The short of it is that we knew we had to run rubygems.org, and there was a number of things that we needed to do that weren't being done. So the open source program was created to oversee sort of like the maturation and that process of developing it into a more robust program. The short, I guess you could say that this is about maintaining and improving critical infrastructure and tools. And we have a lot of grand ideas about where this could go, but we're taking it one step at a time. My focus right now is on operations and growing out the team that executes on rubygems.org. So real quick, you probably already know these things, but I put the slide here just in case any of this is new. So RubyGems is the package manager that you all use to install gems. It is shipped with Ruby by default. That wasn't always the case. In 2003, when they developed it, they went to Mats and they convinced him that we should make this part of Ruby and ship it automatically, and he agreed that this was an improvement. So that's how that came to be. Bundler also, when that was developed, we realized how important dependency management was, and so Bundler became the default choice that you get out of the box with Ruby. And rubygems.org is a canonical package repository. So both RubyGems and Bundler, the clients, use rubygems.org as its API endpoint, and it's also where all the gems are hosted. So both of these are open source projects. You can go onto GitHub to the RubyGems organization, and you can find both repos. RubyGems and Bundler are under the RubyGems repo, and then rubygems.org is the service that runs. RubyGems.org is a Rails app. It is a very boring, regular Rails app. Nothing special about it. Here's some stats on it if you want to look at that. It's Rails 8, it's Postgres. There may be some interesting gems, but really it's just a vanilla Rails app. Our infrastructure, we run in AWS, we run in Kubernetes, we use RDS for Postgres, OpenSearch. S3 is very important because that's where all the gems live. And we have backups for that. So in case we lost our bucket or whatever, I guess we would be fine. We do have backups for that. If we lost the gems, that would be really bad because we would have to ask all the maintainers to, I guess, upload new versions. Anyway, we manage our infrastructure with Terraform. And on the right side here, we've got the various services that sort of make up the whole platform. Fastly, which is a CDN, is massively important. You want to talk about importance of caching? Fastly saves us so much in terms of I/O and infra costs. So thank you, Fastly. I think they probably take 97% of the traffic, and we never see it, which is amazing. Also, CDNs, they have POPs or points of presence all around the world so that you actually get your gem served somewhere, probably in France, I'm guessing. I'm sure the POP is here in France, and you would get it from there. Datadog we use for observability. DN Simple is DNS. How many of you know DN Simple? Are familiar with that? Yes. So almost. Anthony Eden is the founder. His wife is French, and they live in the United States right now, but they've lived in France, and their children grew up in France. So anyway, fun tie-in there. Actually, Anthony created DN Simple in Hawaii at the time. And rubygems.org became one of the first domains that DN Simple served and has been serving. By the way, all these services, I'll talk about this later, provide these services for free. So we actually don't pay anything for these things. Honey Badger does our application monitoring and performance improvements. Mend.io is our malicious gem scanning. We'll talk a little bit about that in the future. And Avo is our admin panel. So this is what we use. The diagram of the infra, pretty standard stuff, nothing special there. By the way, it's one of the reasons, we're going to get into the stats, which is kind of fun. One of the things that's great about this platform and service is how simple it is and how easy it is for us to deal with these things. And if it was complicated, oh my goodness, like if this is microservices, oof. All right, stats. So we, on average, serve over 4 billion gems a month. We're up to 4.3 at this point. You can see some of the other stats. That's 1,600 gems per second that we're averaging. That's some scale. The team is almost all part-timers. actually, which is really kind of fun. This is a global team, so there are folks all around the world on the team, and they have been running this for years, and we've figured out this way to kind of run the service as a part-time effort. So let's talk about what it takes to run rubygems.org. Here are the sort of 6 different areas we're going to dive into today. So the first one is on-call. We do have primary and secondary rotations for on-call. And these are, notifications are basically pages. We use PagerDuty for that. And fun fact, I would say over 90% of those pages auto-resolve themselves. So it's pretty rare that we have a page that comes through that's actually a problem that we need to deal with. Shockingly, we have not had an outage since 2013, like 0 downtime. Now, there has been isolated degradations of service, typically our job queue, and we will get people hop onto our Slack and say, hey, when is my gem going to get published? And so sometimes we do have some parts of the service slow down and maybe get stuck a little bit, but and that's typically when we're responding. It's the job queue that gets the attention. But you can still run like a bundle install or a gem install and it still works. So, yay. I think it's a lot probably of luck really on the 0 outages, I believe, even though the team is great and the way we've kept it simple, it's fantastic, but I think that's a bit of luck there. So infrastructure upgrades, this is something we do on a regular basis every month or 2, and these are some of the ones we've done recently. Probably the most interesting one that we've done, the last sort of thing that we're in the middle of, which is a nice improvement, is we've moved to single sign-on for AWS access for our team over long-lived credentials, which is important. We had a security audit done last year that talked about like some areas that we could improve in how we manage the security of our platform, and this was one of the main points for us to work on. Ruby Gems and bundle releases. We do these regularly, 1 to twice a month we release. This was, I don't remember when the team decided to do this, but they realized they weren't consistently releasing, and so they made it a point that we were going to release at least every month, so thus like you have quick turnaround on bugs and security patches. And the other interesting thing about bundler releases is we have Bundler 4 coming out by the end of 2025, and what's nice about the Bundler 4 release is it's actually a huge tech deck payoff. So there are a bunch of feature flags inside Bundler where you can turn certain things on or off. We are combining all those, we're making them the default, and we're removing those flags. So that's great. So the team's very excited about Bundler 4. Customer support. We get customer support tickets that come in. This is the volume of tickets. It's about 20 tickets per month, which isn't too bad. I think the team spends around 2 hours per month on tickets. There are really 3 types of ticket types that come in. The most common is account recovery. That is what we get the most volume of ticket requests for. We also get ticket requests for removing gems. So you can't just remove, delete, or yank a gem from the repository because there may be things that depend on that gem, and that would be bad. That would be like left pad, if you remember that situation. We don't want a left pad in the Ruby world. And so if you want to remove a gem, you had to put a request in. A team assesses whether or not that gem is actively used or depended upon, and we have data to kind of help with that. So that's another ticket request type. And the other one is gem transfers, ownership transfers. So you can, if you want, transfer a gem that you maintain to someone else, and you can do that, and we facilitate that. Security vulnerabilities. This is another thing that we do. We are part of a bug bounty program for rubygems.org because we want to find any vulnerabilities in our platform, our service. It's so important. And here's some stats on last year and up to June for this year. Interestingly enough, though, most of these reports are absolute garbage. About last fall, I mean, there are always a lot of reports that were just like people like, oh yeah, this is, it's kind of weird when you read these reports. You're like, you don't really understand vulnerabilities because that's actually not. Anyway, it's kind of funny, but about last fall, we saw a huge uptick in AI-generated reports that looked like real bug reports or vulnerability reports, but they weren't. So Unfortunately, you can see this year we have 0 triage. Triage means that they found something that was worth fixing. 3 were closed as were resolved, which means there was something interesting like a documentation improvement or maybe a bug that wasn't a vulnerability, but like, okay, sure, that's a bug that we'll fix. So, but 97, so that's not great. It's a pretty noisy program, but we have had some pretty important vulnerabilities found that we were able to patch very quickly, and so it's still worth it as a program to be engaged in. Malicious gem scanning. I talked about Mend.io earlier. So last year, at least from June to May of last year, or June 2024 to May 2025, we yanked 43 gems. And yanking means we pulled them from the repository, and because they were malicious or spammy or they violated our terms of service. And this process, I wrote a blog post actually about this. I'll get to that page in a moment, but Maciej Mansfeld actually runs this. How many of you know Maciej? He's the Karafka maintainer. Okay. Anyway, Maciej's awesome. He does this all on his own. He finds this a lot of fun. So he does these retroactive scans and catches these gems and works with the team to pull them down. So last week, I wrote a blog post with the team going through actually how this works. So if you want to check this out, it's super interesting. You can go to rubygems.org to the blog and just look for the post from last week with this title, and you can read about actually how we deal with malicious gems. It's very detailed. It's interesting if you find that sort of thing that you want to know more about. All right, let's talk about a few other things outside of operations that we think about. Supply chain security is probably the biggest thing that only we can do and is super important, because you can imagine if a gem you relied on somehow had malicious code injected into it, that could be very, very bad for you all. So this is probably our biggest job beyond just being up and available and providing gems to you, is making sure that there's not a security incident here. So some of the things we've recently worked on, Trusted Publishing and SigStore, which are both related. And this is the work of Samuel Giddens, who are a security engineer. And we're at this point, we're about 11% adoption of SigStore. We're going to see this uptick quite a lot over the next year or so as gem authors adopt it and then push the new versions of their gems with that in place. But this is going to help making sure that, one, the right person publishing is actually publishing the gem, and that the gem is cryptologically what it claims to be. So good stuff there. Organizations is another thing that we've been working on, and we have the first organization, which is AWS. And I'll talk about organizations in a moment, but not many people have this problem, but AWS has over 400 gems. And if you are a maintainer and you've used our interface to manage gems, you can imagine that if you had 400 with different people with different accesses for those gems, that could be quite difficult. And so Organizations was built with some funding from AWS to help build this. And right now, I think they only have 4 gems, but they are going to be moving that in. Actually, this is probably outdated. I know we shipped a new feature that allows them to migrate multiple gems in each move into the organization. But essentially what it does is it gives you, it allows you to do gem management at scale. You now can invite lots of people into one organization, have all the gems under that organization, and then you can give out different permission levels to the users in that organization. So you don't have to give full ownership permissions to, say, a service team at AWS who doesn't know Ruby and might accidentally delete a gem when they didn't mean to do that. So this is currently in beta. We plan to roll this out publicly maybe next year. We want to make sure it's really solid, and AWS is they're the ones with the problem with the scale that they need to figure out. So we want to make sure it's fully bug-free before it rolls out further. Some other work that we're looking at doing in the rest of this year and next year, precompiled binaries. That's what Samuel Giddens has been working on. He just released an RFC on this. And that is where you won't have to, when you install a gem with native extensions, it will no longer compile on your machine. It will be precompiled for you, and it will just pull down the proper architecture for you. So that will save a lot of time. Bundle audit is a project that we're proposing for next year. And bundle policy. And bundle policy is a concept that you could set policies around what kind of gems could be installed, like they have to be trusted published, or they have to have a certain license type, or that maybe they have seen a release in the last 5 years or something like that. So that's the idea, that that can be enforced when you do a bundle install. And this is really important for companies with compliance concerns and have a lot of gyms and a lot of people working, because they can't keep an eye on that. And then adding teams to organizations. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is, how do we actually pay for all this? Because Ruby Gems is a free service, nobody pays for it, and yet it is not free to operate. So this is what the budget looked like in 2024. You can see the 4 different places where funding comes in. And what I'll point out here, we'll talk a little bit about these in a moment, but I'm not going to talk about grants, but grants are over 60% of the funding from last year. And this has been what has catapulted this program to the next level. But the challenge with grants is that they're not renewable by default. And so I have grant money that's great and has allowed us to expand our staffing and take on projects, but I have to apply for them every year, and there's no guarantee that I'll get them. As a matter of fact, we were working with the Sovereign Tech Agency out of Germany last year, and we're no longer working with them. So those funds got used and were not renewed. So at the beginning of the month, last month, I'm sorry, in August, I wrote a post about actually what the funding model looks like and how we pay for these things. And so if you're interested to learn more, you can go into that post and read about it. Infrastructure donors. So I mentioned these already. I mentioned that we don't pay for this because they provide all these services for free. And so that is a huge cost. It's over $300,000 a year in services that we'd have to pay for that we get for free. And we appreciate their support. And it makes it possible to run this team on a smaller budget than otherwise would be required. The open source sponsors is a new program that we launched last year, and we're going to have more about this, but 3 companies have stepped up to help cover the gap with grant funding, and that's Shopify, Gusto, and Sentry. My goal, part of my job is actually making sure I have funding for next year so I can keep the team busy and employed. And so I'm looking to expand this probably to 10 to 20 companies that want to help support our programs and make sure that we have plenty of staffing. Then the next piece is supporters and members. And Ruby Together had a membership program that people joined to help support their efforts as well. And that migrated to Ruby Central. And so we have 7 supporters, and these are essentially companies that pay between $2,000 to $5,000 a year to help run the program. We have 7 of those members. And then members are individuals essentially, and then we have 168 of those, and they could pay anywhere from like $50 a year up to like $1,000. Just this last week, we launched a new page, a supporter page that actually acknowledges that, and it's kind of fun. Penny Lane, which is a French company, so thank you, Penny Lane. If you have any people here, that's awesome, yay. So Penny Lane's one of our supporters, and I have this sort of goal to get up to 100 companies in the supporter program. Because I had this conversation at Baltic Ruby about this back in June, and one of the sponsors said, "Hey Marty, we'd like to just write you a check. Is there a way I can like give you a credit card?" And I said at the time we didn't have that. Well, I've now set that up, so now you can go to the supporter page, and there's a way that you can sign up. And if you are like an engineering leader and you don't want to go through the convincing your C-suite to become sponsors, you can also just use a credit card, and then if you've got the budget and you can approve that yourself, then that's great. This is what it looks like. We're going to be, this is actually on the Ruby Central website where you can sign up for this. This actually uses Ghost CMS as a backend if you're familiar with Ghost. That's how we currently run this. That's where it originally started. We're in the process of building this natively on rubygems.org. So it will migrate probably in the next month over to there, and it'll look visually different. And that's it. Merci. Any questions? No questions. All right. Oh, yes.
So you talk about the main.io service.
Yes.
Is it already helping to prevent a supply chain attack?
So does it? You're asking, does it actually prevent those attacks essentially? It helps a lot, but it doesn't catch all of them. So the code that Maciej wrote that he sold to is called Defend originally, and he sold it to Mind.io, and they use it. It's very, very good, but it doesn't catch everything. And one of the reasons why we don't have this in a automatically in a publish flow is we don't want attackers to figure out how to beat it. So we run it post-process. And it's a little aggressive, and so it requires a human to review everything it flags. And then we review to say, gosh, does this look okay for you? Like, what are they doing here? And so anyway, it's very clever. You could ask Maciej, he'd be happy to tell you all the tricks he uses to catch that stuff. But no, I don't think it'll catch everything. And I think encouraging people to report these gems is important. I will say with malicious gems, these are always new gems that are being uploaded pretty much. And so they don't have anyone using it. So like when you look at gems, like buyer beware. Look at this stuff. Look at the code. Who's publishing this? Do you trust them? Are you really going to put that into your Rails app? I would look very closely at that stuff to make sure like you know what you're getting, because it would really suck if they backdoor stole like access to production or loaded some virus on your servers or something. Yep. Any others? Oh, okay. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I think I remember that you mentioned you do infrastructure updates once a month or two. That sounds extremely frequent to me, especially when I think about this project as something that's really stable. So I'd like to know how your team decide on the frequency of updates and how to do what. How do you decide what to update this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's usually like, are we upgrading Kubernetes or Postgres? Postgres happens like maybe once a year. So we don't upgrade, we just upgrade to 14. The team talks about it, about what they want to improve, and then they decide, oh yeah, it's worth changing it and upgrading. Because you're right, I mean, if it just works, if the infrastructure is fine, why do we need to touch it? Well, there are new releases, there are new patches, and so the team decides, they go through each piece and decide, we want to upgrade OpenSearch. And it's usually planned out usually 2 or 3 months in advance. Like, okay, we're going to do this, and like here's the rollout plan, the testing plan for that, and how they release it. So I think it roughly turns to like once every month or two, something in production changes in the infrastructure. But we use Terraform, and so we can, we have environments where we simulate this, and so we can run traffic through it and play with that. So it's not like a YOLO right into production, like, hope it works. No, we do have a test process for it, but because of Terraform, it's pretty easy to make that change and then try it out. Okay, thank you so much.